The Enneagram is a map of the human personality. It's a tool for navigating relationships. It creates language for what motivates us and helps us look at the way we look at everything else. Most importantly, the Enneagram's a mirror because sometimes you need help seeing yourself. My name's Jeff Cook. I'm a philosopher in Greeley, Colorado, and with me is TJ Wilson, businessman, lover of theology, and Enneagram ninja.
Hello.
My man.
Hey.
TJ, we have a new friend.
Yay. I love new friends.
Beth McCord is with us. And for those of you who do not know, Beth is a well-known, very well-regarded Enneagram teacher and coach. She's the author of 12 books, including 9 type-specific studies, and it is an honor to have her. So welcome, Beth.
Welcome, Beth.
Hey, thanks for having me. This is going to be so much fun.
We are talking about parenting and parents today. Beth, apparently, not only have you just written a book about parenting, but you are a parent. So how would you describe yourself as a parent, your family, what are the types of your family, et cetera?
Yeah. So my kids are grown, and my daughter is 24. My son is almost 26. And my daughter's married, and she has our first grandson, who's 5 months old, and I am loving it. I wasn't sure. I mean, everyone talks about loving grandparenting. Parenting was really hard for me, and we can totally get into all of that. A lot of it has to do with my Enneagram type and my life story. So I was kind of like, I don't know, is this going to be great? And man, it is awesome. So awesome. And so, my son, he's the one that's almost 26. He is a social 6. And my daughter is a self-pres 2. And then my husband, we've been married 29 years. He is a 1-to-1 or sexual 6.
This is going to be very fun because not only do you and TJ share the same type, but you're married to the same type. So the 9-6 dynamics may get talked about quite a bit.
Yeah, awesome. I love it.
So for those of you, dear listener, some of you may know this. Not only is TJ a 9 who's a parent and Beth's a 9 who's a parent, but I have a parent who's a 9. And so as we're talking about parenting and being children, that may come up a little bit. And so just to prepare that there's all sorts of combinations of parents and the types and the dynamics at play. But to just give an example, I imagine that one may be quite helpful as we're moving. So your book, Beth, is out. Yeah.
Yeah. It just came out 2 weeks ago.
Come on. I got the digital copy, so I wasn't sure. I wanted to point out just 3 quick things on the book just to get us into it. So I'm a snob, especially when it comes to topics that I think I know something about. Beth will be able to see the pretentious bookshelf behind me, for example. And to be honest, I was prepared for this book to be like most Enneagram books that I read they have a couple of points that I'm like, oh yeah, okay, that's good. I was actually thrilled by this text. I found that,
we should make sure that, like, not only that people know the name, but also for the sake of your point, this book is called The Enneagram for Moms.
Truth. And as a dad, as a cisgendered male, I found this book really helpful. It's not necessarily for, I think a lot of people might think that you should give this to somebody who's just become a new mom. But part of it is that understanding your kid's type and the dynamics at play is going to be central to the text. And so for somebody like myself who actually has kids who I'm trying to kick out of my house at this point in time, it's actually far more applicable than it would have been if, I was dealing with my 4-year-old and 2-year-old. This book not only spoke to me as somebody who's fairly well informed on Enneagram, I thought that you did a stellar job of making it accessible to new folks. And so this book does one of the really tricky things that most of us have a really hard time with who are trying to write on Enneagram. It's to make it accessible and yet not just say the same thing.
Yeah.
And so well done. And the name of the book is, I have a digital copy. So
The Enneagram for Moms. Like you said, we talked about this earlier. Two things is really the Enneagram, even though I nuanced it for moms, because that's my story. And actually been passionate about writing this book for like 20 years. I kind of nuanced it to moms because that's a lot of my audience. And as we talked before, and I think to your point of enjoying the book, that it really is an Enneagram book for parents. So dads are out there listening, go ahead and pick it up. You're going to learn a ton of stuff from the book. We just happen to kind of gear it a little bit towards the mom sector. But also to your point, this is definitely not a book for just young moms. I mean, I use the Enneagram way more now with my kiddos that are now adults than I ever did before because we have that common language
Hmm.
and I can really speak and understand their heart and create a deeper, more authentic relationship with them than, of course, like you were saying, when they're 8 or 5. And but it is an important work, I think, for us parents to really dive into the Enneagram on behalf of our kids, not only for ourselves.
Like I have a 4-year-old, and so like a lot of this stuff is a little bit different for like applying to me than it is to adult children, but also thinking about it in terms of my relationship with my parents. I think there's a lot of that in this as well.
Absolutely.
That, you know,
Absolutely. Mhm.
Wanted to start with two observations, as is often the case with great books. The first chapter is worth the price of the book. The image that you begin with is one that I, as a parent, many parents have experienced of being on a playground and having feelings of shame and comparison, and just walking through that. And I want to just start with a quote that you have because I think it sets in motion much of what really stood out to me. But you wrote, "When our children enter our lives, we don't yet know who they are or who they will become. We don't realize that they have a very specific personality type already placed within them that over the course of time will emerge through the mixing of life experiences, self awareness, and maturity. Therefore, when they are born and lie so little and helpless in our arms, we falsely assume that their personality is like this unmixed can of paint that looks white. We assume they are ready for us to add our own personality traits, core motivations, and ways of seeing and interacting with the world to them. So as we begin, sorry, so, see, I'm trying to avoid these, and it's just not happening. So as we begin raising them, we try to add our own color using whatever stir sticks we already have, parenting techniques and strategies that consciously or unconsciously reflect our own Enneagram type's motivation. We attempt to morph our kids into the main color of the palette we know best, our own. Then something unexpected happens. Our children begin exhibiting behaviors and ways of thinking that don't align with our own. In these moments, we are tempted to assume our way is superior and prejudge their actions as wrong. Let me keep that quote in hand for a minute.
Okay.
On shame, the idea of being a parent and feelings of comparison, I found like I connected to those. I'm really curious about you connecting to those because I don't necessarily associate shame with nines, especially because I've seen TJ who blows past shame as though, you know, it's a stoplight that is in a one stop town and he's the only resident. Is this something that hits you as a parent? And I was hoping you could talk about that.
Yeah. Well, I feel like, at least for me and the women that I've been around, the girls that I grew up with, we are constantly with what we should be like. Now, I've said that also with the awareness that I grew up with a mom who was much more codependent from her own childhood trauma and really taught me how to be in that codependent stance, which is a 9, no problem. I can do that all day long. So, with a lot of relationship dynamics growing up were contingent on did I come through or did not come through in the ways that people were laying out for me. And of course, being codependent, and you're like, oh well, then I gotta come through if I'm going to be safe, if I'm going to have connection. If I don't, then there's going to be tension, there's going to be conflict, or someone's going to be upset. And so then that kind of bled into, and that really started with my relationship with my older brother who loved to tease me. Um, and it was mine, really tender, sensitive heart, landed on me well. So I was trying to like make him happy all the time. And so then like bled into my relationship with my husband, who, even we were talking about it recently, like he's like, oh, I've always loved you. Like, have those thoughts. But it was so ingrained in me as a woman, as a mom. And I think also with our air quotes Christianity culture of how a lot of women have been viewed, that I need to be something that I'm not in order to be accepted and loved. And then when you get into the mom circles, there's a lot of mom shaming. I know how to do it better than you. This is how you should do it. And so there's just this interesting dynamic that comes up. And then us moms, we're terrified of raising our kids in a way that they don't feel loved and nurtured. So then we're reading and we're trying to observe. So the point of that the first story in the chapter was when my kids were 1 and 3, and I was just starting to learn the Enneagram. This is back in 2001. And I went out to the playground and, I was just like, man, that mom over there, she's so fun and creative. But that mom over there, man, she can really connect with her kids on a deep emotional level. And then I would see another mom like, man, she's a great leader, you know? And I was just like, but not me. Like, I'm not this level. And so I took all of those incredible aspects of other women and made one super woman or super mom in my mind, as if I need to come through in all of those categories in order to be the mom that my kids needed and probably wanted. And so then I just felt utter shame and failure all the time. And that's when, I was telling my husband about it. And he was just so kind and wise. He just said, you've created this superwoman that does not exist. You can't become that person because she doesn't exist. We all have different gifts and strengths and weaknesses. And he said, plus, you don't know what the other moms are struggling with behind their closed doors. Because when they're on the playground, they're like putting their best foot forward. And that's what you're seeing, which is great. Like you get to enjoy those aspects of those moms. But most of us moms tend to feel that we have to become something that we're not good enough. And I think for me as a 9, I totally understand where some 9s might not feel the same shame. I have a lot of type 9s are like, I don't feel anger. And I'm like, what? I'm like, how do anger is just
That's crazy.
bubble
It's
and
crazy talk.
it's like it's bubbling underneath the surface. But I do resonate more with the 9 than 8. I use a lot of my 1 in my work environment, but my 8 is there. But my 8 really is there due to that being teased and never good enough around my brother. And so it's always simmering right there. But of course, as a 9, I feel like, well, I can't really show those true colors because then that's going to create tension and conflict. Maybe someone will like me. So I've got to shove it way down and just look kind and peaceful. And so then you carry that out into all of your relationships. And then you're not really being who you truly are because you're just trying to accommodate to the wants and the desires of everyone around you. So the thing really, I think, comes in more 2 things. I'm not who people say I should be. I'm not good enough. And I think deep down, I know I'm not being who I really had to be. So that's kind of in a nutshell what the shame is from a type 9 mom's perspective.
That's teach.
Yeah, a couple of things about that like really stood out to me. One is that if there's anyone out there who doesn't think that there is an impact between the way we were raised as males and the way we were raised as females, like this, I think is a perfect example of that because I was never given the type of expectations of how I should be as a parent. Because, like, even though I did grow up in a similar Christian culture, I didn't take those classes. My classes were about how to be a man and like fight with a sword and also still be strong in the boardroom and all of that stuff. Like there is a difference between how we are raised in genders and like it's real. The and it creates different kinds of false expectations that we grow up with, right? Like you grew up with this super mom kind of thing, and my wife grew up with that as well. But she's not a 9, so it comes out a little differently. It's still present. I never had the expectations put on me that I was supposed to be a super dad because I'm still part of the culture that says when dads are watching the kids, he's babysitting. It's like, no, he's being a dad. That's not a real thing. Anyway, that was one big thing that stood out. Males versus females. It's the way we're raised is still really impactful there. And
Also, as a parent, that strikes me. There's a twofold thing. There's the feeling of I'm not good enough on one side, but then there's the okay, what should fill in that space? How do I improve? Obviously, one that I am, that's how that energy is directed. But I don't think that's I bet you that's common for most. I'm not feeling good enough, so how do I improve? So I look at other people to see what they are doing, and clearly that's what I'm supposed to be doing. And this was the place where I think your book is really a helpful tool is that your pivot at this point is to say you actually have superpowers as an individual, how you're made, the wiring that you have that are designed specifically for the kids that you've been gifted. And if you don't push into that, it's going to be a severe misstep. And so you don't need supermom powers, but you do have superpowers in your Enneagram type. Can you talk about just generally superpowers as a parent? You have type specific
Yes. Yeah,
abilities.
yeah. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to write this book. And really for moms, this kind of goes back to what we were just saying, the difference between moms and dads and kind of how we were raised, is that all the moms that I know, they're feeling like they're not good enough from their own type's perspective because they see their faults, they feel them, and they feel like they were made as a mistake or they're just not doing it right. And because they're looking at this influencer or that author or whoever, that speaker, and they're like, oh, I can't live up to that for some reason. I've tried and I can't. And I wanted to write a book that said, no, you were created to be you. It wasn't a mistake that you were created your type. And to explore what that means to bless your kids with the gifts that you have, the strengths that you have, is paramount for their well being, but also for you to be absolutely true to who you are and to enjoy it. And it's when we enjoy who we are, that is a gift to our kids because then we're going to be able to enjoy who they are. And so that's kind of the real heart behind this book, was for people to fully embrace who they've been created to be.
As
Stellar
opposed to like the Instagram mom.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
I always wanted to be the Instagram mom. There's a stellar quote that's up front. The quote ends with, then something unexpected happens. Our children begin exhibiting behaviors and ways of thinking that don't align with our own. In these moments, we're tempted to assume our way is superior, prejudge their actions as wrong. Not only your own type, but your kid's type. Beth, you came to Enneagram fairly early, understanding your own type. Now, obviously, your kids are young. I imagine there's a huge jump into saying, I need to relate to, understand, and see the perspective of my children in order to be my best self for them. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, well, so I always tell people I wrote the book you need, not the book you want.
Yeah.
Because the book you want is the book I want. Just give me the instruction manual for Nate and Libby. Like, that's it.
Right.
And then I'll just follow the rules for their types and then we're good.
Yeah.
It's just that's not life. That's not reality. And so what I've learned along the way is, at least I know that there are probably some Enneagram teachers out there, and so I don't know what you guys believe, but quite a few teachers believe that we're born with our age. And I always talk about it being like, wearing sunglasses with a certain colored lens. Like, even as a baby, we're seeing, experiencing, interpreting, and reacting to the world through our lens. We don't know if it's just the world we lived in, but that's how we're experiencing life. But that's to the point also with that paint can analogy, is that, when you walk into Sherman-Williams and let's say you want laughter, when, in our logo, the type 9 is a purple color, not that
The best color.
purple. Yeah.
Yeah, the best
Not
one.
that- but that's just what we use. And so if we were to walk into the paint store and let's say, this is kind of the analogy of, getting your child, it's like, take a lavender, please, and it's like, we think that we can just get whatever we want. But actually what happens is that we're going into Sherman-Williams and, when you get the base paint, you hand over this can of white paint and then they put it under the little, mixer thing. All these different colors come out to eventually mix together to become that exact shade of color. But when they do that, all of those colors just go to the bottom and they stay there. And so if you were to look at it right then, it just still looks like a can of white paint. So that's like what it's like when we are given our children, whether they're biological or adopted children, when they're younger, we think, oh, cool, look, it's just a can of white paint. I can pick them whatever I want to be. And so because we see the world through our personality lens, we think our way of doing life is the right way. It's just, it is. So as I got my kids, I'm like, sweet, I'm going to make them some form of purple, some form of a peacemaker, peaceful accommodator, whatever type, name you want to use. And because I think my kids should be empathetic and kind and compassionate and soft spoken and these little angels, not disrupting anything. So I was trying to create these little peaceful accommodators. And what happens is you're starting to mix their kind of life and circumstances is mixing it. And all of a sudden you see a little orange, like, wait, what? Like, that's weird. And you see a little blue. And then you see, all these colors are coming forth because our kids are surrounded by all sorts of people. Now, that doesn't mean they're becoming those types. That their type is already there. But they are trying to understand their own world, what's around them. And so they're kind of bringing in different aspects of life. And then it's when they're teenagers that as parents go, whoa, wait, you've never been like this before. You used to be whatever, like you used to be so kind. You used to be whatever. You were. It's really about that time that our personality is like, excuse me, I want to individuate. I want to be me. Well, then the parent doesn't know what to do with it. And that's when our personality is really starting to kind of say, hey, I want to be me. And it's trying to like really kind of get out there. But of course, we're young. And so we don't know how to do it in the healthiest way. So we're just kind of doing it. And it just really rubs our parents wrong because we're not following in line with what their personality type was trying to get us to be like. And so all of a sudden there's this rub going on. And and so for me, I want parents to realize your child was born with their personality type. And you were created with your personality type to be their parent. But there is going to be some messiness in the mixture when we don't know their type. And that's why I wrote this book that they need what they want, because what they need is to understand their own personal developmental story with their own personality type. When we know our own story and we can learn how to self regulate, to understand our emotions, why we react the way we react, then we'll have a much better handle of what comes up, no matter what type our kids are. And this is so important because as myself, as a type 9, I don't have a type 8 child, but this is just such an easy example. As a type 9, if I had a type 8 daughter, as her personality is just kind of coming forth in the ways that it naturally would, I would naturally think that's wrong. That's why is she being? I need to correct her out of those certain personality traits. Now, there is the giftedness of the 9 to help any of the types to know how to be more empathetic and kind and thoughtful and all those wonderful things. But if I'm not aware of how I get triggered, then I'm going to not be aware of how I'm not seeing the traits that actually are going to be useful and powerful for my type 8 daughter. I'm going to just try to snap them out. So if my daughter, let's say, kind of blows up to me and says no, or talks back, or is strong and assertive and says her piece, I'm going to be like, whoa, that is just terrible. It's wrong. I need to this, Of course, I'm going to do it in a very type 9-ish way. But what if we were to understand that our children are using their personality and their traits, their perspectives, their reactions in a way that is immature? They haven't learned how to do it in the correct way. And how can we affirm what we can affirm about what's going on, but then also redirect them with ways that they can actually use those aspects as strengths versus weaknesses? So if my daughter were to blow up and be really strong and direct and let's say disrespectful to me as a parent, but can't I affirm that she is speaking her mind, that she's asserting her voice? But to her mom, that's the best correct way of using that gift. Like when she's in the boardroom, when she's older and the executives are doing something illegal or wrong or there's injustice, I want her to be able to be strong and to say what needs to be said, but also know how to do it in a way that actually will allow her to be heard versus ignored because she's being too strong once again. So helping them to know how to use those strengths in a very specific way, I think is the greatest gift that we get to be as parents. The hard part is knowing ourselves well enough to be able to do that and to have self-regulation, because I can guarantee you, if I had a type B daughter, be debated all the time. And I
And
would need to do a lot of work to be self-regulated so that I can really give her the best of who I am, for her to be the best who she is. Does this make sense where I'm going with
oh
this?
yeah,
Does
yeah,
no,
absolutely.
what I'm hearing is you have type-specific powers as a parent. It would be a huge mistake if you didn't see that your kid has type-specific powers as a kid and to foster those and not to force them into your model. You're comparing yourself to other parents. Don't compare your kid to yourself, sort of things. Did you have
Exactly.
a thought, teacher?
Yeah, I first want to I want to commend you on the color aspect of this. Like, I'm my wife is an art teacher at a public high school, and like, if you understand color theory, this makes so much sense. And think about like as a nine, in your representation, purple, the best color, represents us nines. And if my child comes out swinging with orange, there's a reasonable chance that that swinging is actually in an a response against my purple, and it's not necessarily a real reflection of who they are at blue or yellow or whatever it is, but like they're in parenting in children, like we have been led to believe through thousands of years that part of what parenting is dealing with the kids s- trying to not be like us. And that is part of it. They maybe end up being just like us, but they still have to swing out and try to be something different for a little while. And that's part of putting on these layers of personality and everything, and not being able to recognize that sometimes even that orange showing up isn't even going to be their real destination. It's just going to be something they're trying for a little while. And this this idea is so much in line with so much else that we talk about Enneagram theory. This is a beautiful microcosm of the larger theory that, like, what we're doing here is learning to see that the way that other people see is different from ours. And that is also true for our kids. They do not come into the world as a blank canvas. Maybe it looks like a blank canvas, but there's something underneath there. And that's more interesting than a blank canvas anyway. So,
Yeah, and so, like, when you are handed that can of what you think is a white paint,
mhm.
you know that their personality, the shade of purple, because, hey, EJ, you and I were just already we're talking, like, we're different type now. Like, yeah, we have
Right.
the same core motivations. There's a lot of similarities, but we have different stories. We have different interests. There's lots of things that are unique about us. And so we are our own shade of purple color. And but so, like, our kids have their own unique shade, their personality, but it's down there. We just can't see it. And
Mm,
so for us, I want parents to understand that our gift to them is to be curious about them.
yeah. Yeah.
Because what kids are really wanting, what we're all wanting, is to be attuned to be seen, to be heard, to be understood, and not be, told we're wrong all the time or we're bad and all that stuff. How can we bring out the best of who our kids are already? And
Mhm.
so often they're giving the opposite message. I mean, why can't we be their greatest cheerleader? Yes, we still have to parent them. Yes, we still have to guide them. Yes, we still have to correct them. But what if we're their greatest cheerleader because we're curious about them, not trying to force them into something that they're not?
Yep.
Takes a lot of wisdom to know the difference between changing your kid's personality versus altering their bad behavior. And even being able to recognize this is bad behavior for this type versus others. It may be the case. So a common criticism thrust towards nines, which you guys may know, is just the lack of movement. And to be a savvy parent, I assume for the sake of a nine, knowing what is actual sloth versus this is my withdrawn personality in the world and who I am requires quite a bit of wisdom and ability to see things from your, what is where is this a healthy or unhealthy lack of movement? I imagine.
But let's take it a step further.
Do
The reason why I say let's take it a step further is, if my parents were able to understand all 9 types, and let's say, because you can't type your kid because they have to be the ones to say what type they are, 'cause it's about their motivations. What if my parents were like, you know what? seems like she might be a 9, a 2, a 6, be somewhere in that category. For them not to just see why I can be slothful or, not moving or not asserting myself, what happens when I do assert myself? What are they doing in that moment? And the reason I bring that up is I was this little 5-year-old girl, and this was back in the 1980s. My dad was a doctor, and he would get these drug rep trinkets, and they were to like hand them out, because it had a drug name on them, and hopefully people would want the drug. But anyway, he didn't do it that way. But so he brought home these little shirt pocket address books, really tiny, really fuzzy. No one's gonna want these. She brought home like 12, and I'm like, sweet, 5 years old, and I'm like sitting there thinking, what do I do with these? Like, I mean, I could write in all of them, but there are a lot of them. So I had this ingenious idea: go around the neighborhood and sell them for 5 cents, only to make a killing, right? So I started going to my neighbor's house, and I go to the first one across the street, and she, I don't know what she was thinking, truthfully, but she gave me 5 cents, and I thought, this is incredible. So I go to the next house, and I'm doing the same thing. Well, it's time that my type 6 mom, my self-preservation type 6 mom, who was very fearful, saw what I was doing and called me back home. So I went back home, and I'm thinking, be super proud of me. Look at me, I'm out there asserting myself, this little entrepreneur, right? This is ingenious. No, she was, and she wasn't, like really harsh or mean, but for a type 9, anything huge. And so she's like, that's inappropriate. We don't sell things to our neighbors. You need to go back and give them the money. And it was at that age 5, not knowing, she didn't know this. That's when I thought, I will never assert myself again unless I get the okay, the permission. I know it's not going to disrupt anything. At 5 years old, I couldn't have known I was a mom. But that goes back to the point of need to be curious about where our kids are really coming from and what strengths were there, but also how to redirect them if redirection actually needs to happen. Um, because if I had a type 8 mom or type 3 or type 7 mom, they would have been like, that's fun. You go. Let me help you. Let's like build a business out of this. And so, but my mom's message felt so big and so true to me. And she was not in any way trying to harm me, but it really had lasting effects. And so, to your point of seeing some of the negative behaviors for sure, oh, when I asserted myself, which is the hardest thing for me to do as mine, for her to have been able to see that and to cheer me on would have really changed the trajectory of a lot of my life.
And I'm even thinking about not just to cheer you on, but even more self-awareness on the part of your parent in that space could have sort of folded in some of her values. We don't go door to door selling to our neighbors, but we could set up a stand here where they can come to us
Yeah,
if they want to.
exactly.
This is a great idea. We'd love for you to sell this, and let's do it in a way where it doesn't make us look bad to the neighbors, but still gives you the freedom to pursue this. Yeah.
Yeah.
Lots of self-awareness would have had to come from that.
Yes. And again, that goes back to the whole point of the book is it's really there for moms and parents to be aware of themselves,
Mhm.
what activates them positively and negatively. What they can impart to their kids without forcing them to be like them, but also what makes them want to get rid of their kids' traits and personality
Mhm.
aspects and to be very tuned and aware. Now, I'm sure there's a lot of people going out there who's like, how am I supposed to do all that? Well, we're doing it all the time anyway. We're just not taking the effort to really integrate it with how we're parenting. And yes, it takes time, but trust me, the benefits later of being curious and attuning to your kids is astronomical. And it's
Mhm.
the very thing we want. We want our kids to even attune to us and be curious about us, understand why we do what we do. And then to care for us in the way that makes sense to us and same to them.
I have to confess, Beth, as I was reading your book, I thought you were a 3. I was like, how'd she mistype? She knows quite a bit. And then I read the sentence, we're not writing their story. We are a part of their story. This means that we're not in control. And there's the angle I was like, oh, I see
I
it.
wrote down that quote too.
And
Yeah.
as the rest of the book unfolded for me, I'm like, the one thing that I just adore, that I really cherish about TJ's perspective on Enneagram, and it's something that I saw all over your book, is the ability to not only see other people's perspectives, but to give them the permission to be themselves and say to us, hey, you don't need to be in charge here. Let them move forward. And it's a message that a lot of us need to hear.
I think most parents really want their kids to be themselves, to be who they are. Though they don't have the same perspective that mine has, that is very receptive, accepting, non-judgmental. I want you to have a voice. I want you to have a place at the table. Who are you? Yes, that is a nine's natural bent. And at the same time, that beautiful aspect gets turned on its head and we lose ourselves. And so we have to be very mindful as nines of how quickly us nine parents will lose track of our own selves so that our kids have their own voice and focus too much on them versus family or versus taking care of myself. So all the types are going to have their Achilles heel. And that I think can be definitely a type nine's Achilles heel.
I was just thinking about before we started recording, Jeff and I were chatting about like he really was drawn into this book and he has been talking about it for a while. He loves this book and I really liked it, and it didn't speak to me the same way until I realized that like reading this book as a nine is part of the thing that I struggle with as a parent, is like allowing so much space that I don't bring my own awareness to it. Like when I am with my daughter, and I'm not to say the primary caregiver, but my wife teaches at a high school, so I'm with my daughter during the days. And the way that I come to provide her space to be herself, part of that is for my own benefits, because I don't want to pay enough attention to what I want and need in my life to like I have to focus on things like discipline and guidelines and like here are the guardrails for how you can be, instead of it being a wide open space. I still have to come to the table knowing my own limitations, even as someone who sees the world in a way that like sees other people first.
Yeah. And that totally makes sense. I think what's interesting about like my story, the kind of the bent of codependency and my parents being very much rule followers, I wanted to impart some of that to my kids because I could see how rules were kind of like, I always use the analogy, New York City, like a school in New York City, and their playground is up the top of a skyscraper. Well, if there's no big, large fence, tall fence on the whole perimeter, they're not going to be playing. They're just going to be like right in the middle, scared
Right.
to death. But when you put that fence and that parameter, it's like, hey, this isn't here to hurt and harm you. This is here to benefit you so that you can explore and have fun and all these things. And so when I recognized that, especially with some of the great things my parents taught me, I realized that the work I needed to do to love my kids was actually to do the very thing that was hard, which was disciplining.
Mhm.
Because disciplining, they're going to get upset, they're going to watch, they're going to cry, they're going to do all the things. And that's super hard for an eye. But I had to put aside all of that to see the end game and say, okay, the end game is that they're going to be hopefully mature, self-regulated, kind, bold adults that can function in our society in an awesome way. And they can't do that if I don't give them boundaries, if I don't give them guidance. And if I don't make them unhappy a lot of times, like they have to learn what it means to be unhappy. And for us nines, that like feels like, and
Mhm.
so I think for us nines, that is absolutely so hard to be the disciplinarian, to say what needs to be said. But I think to your point too, know what we need. I'm still trying to figure like it's going to daily, weekly, seasonal thing of like, I don't know, what do I need now? And that's an ongoing thing because my attention so quickly goes from myself to anyone else because
Right.
it's easier.